This is the Christian Circle podcast, and you're listening to Pamela Fernandez, where we have conversations about Christian living. Here's the show. Hi, welcome to episode 34. This week we have a special guest, Pat Gohn. She's an author of Blessed, Beautiful, and Bodacious, celebrating the gift of Catholic womanhood. And she's also a columnist, a catechist, and a host of the Among Women podcast. So today, Pat's going to give away 3 free copies of her book to any of our listeners. And if you're interested in winning a free copy, then you can leave a comment on my website. You can tweet me, Facebook me, or even write to me at contact@pamelaqfernandez.com. So any of these will do, and I will send you a free copy after a raffle draw is done at the end of next week's episode. Now, before we go on to the podcast, I would also like to tell you that we are being sponsored this week, so let's listen to our sponsors.
Attention church leaders, are you looking to grow your church membership and congregation? Look no further than noahseventvenue.com/church. Noah's Event Venue rents its location out to church groups just like yours for Sunday worship services, Bible study, prayer groups, Sunday school, and more. So come ye 2 by 2 to Noah's. For more information, just give us a call at 843-455-6845 or visit us online at noahseventvenue.com/church. Don't forget to ask us about getting 1 month free. That's noahseventvenue.com/church. We'd love to have your congregation meet at Noah's.
Well, thank you for having me today. I'm looking forward to our conversation. Mm-hmm. I have been a wife and a mother for many years, and just recently, in the last year, I became a grandmother. Wow. So I'm an empty nester and looking forward to the next generation in our family. I've long been a writer, and I've been involved in church ministry over the years, especially women's ministries. I've been involved in my church and speaking and giving retreats to women. Since 2009, I too have been podcasting. Wow. I have a podcast called Among Women, and over 250 episodes to date.
Wow.
I'm largely somebody who, is what the Catholic Church calls a catechist, somebody who teaches about the faith. I love to teach about the Bible and the Scriptures. I love to teach about, growing in prayer, relationship with the Lord, that sort of thing. My day job is now a kind of, it's similar to my state in life. Just as you kind of graduate to being an older woman and maybe a grandmother and more of a mentor type of life in your family. Also in my work, I'm doing a lot more mentoring work now, especially for writers. I work as an editor for Catholic magazines. Okay. I'm the editor for Catechist magazine, and I also do editorial supervision for Catholic Digest magazine and Today's Catholic Teacher magazine. So I've been in this editor's role now for the last few years, and my work now is not only to be shining a light on the work that I have been writing about, but to shine a light on other people's writing. So, I'm an author of a few books and countless magazine articles over the years. But it's a real pleasure to work as an editor with other people and bringing their words to readers. So that's it. I do work full time in the editorial work, and the ministry work that I do is more on my own time after work. In the evenings, I teach a Bible class at my church in the spring and in the fall, and then I also take speaking engagements and teaching opportunities when I can.
I can't believe you're saying that's it because you've done so much.
Well, it's really, just one thing has grown out of another. For many years, all I did was write, magazine articles and articles for the web. And then, publishers reached out to me based on some of the themes I was writing about, like especially for women. I was doing, the Among Women podcast. I was going out and giving talks and retreats to women. And that kind of moved into writing a book for women that's called Blessed, Beautiful, and Bodacious. And then once you put a book out there, other people call you to say, well, can you give us a retreat on this subject and things like that. So it's kind of like slowly mushrooms in different ways. You know, I think that's kind of how the Holy Spirit leads us sometimes. I don't do it all at once. It's kind of in different seasons, if you will.
Okay. Now, I read your post on tips for personal prayer on catholicdigest.com. And it was really nice because we are focusing on prayer. And today, I think one of the things that a lot of families complain about is there's no time for prayer. So why is prayer so important, especially for those people who are busy?
Oh, you know, one of the great saints was Francis de Sales. And he used to say, everybody should pray 30 minutes a day.
Yeah.
But busy people should pray an hour. And I think what he was trying to say when he said something to that effect was that the more you have to do, the more you need God's help to do it, you know?
Yeah.
And if we're talking about the Christian life, this idea of like being in a relationship with God, that's at the heart of your Christian life. You know, we're invited to pray daily, not just at church on Sundays. You know, our relationship with God, you know, who is a God of love, the God of the universe, is something that should be part of the daily conversation in our lives, you know, one-to-one every day. So this idea of having personal prayer time not only acknowledges this call to be in relationship with God who loves us, but also devoting time to nourish it. And I think that's what de Sales was talking about when he was talking about this hour a day. Because when you think of your own human relationships, talking, being an attentive listener to conversations, that's so important to nurture those relationships. We have to spend time talking. If we're a married person, for example, I'm married, I have to spend time talking to my husband and listening to my husband, you know, every day. This is important for our long-term, you know, happiness and growth as a couple. Same thing in our relationships with our friends, our relationships with colleagues, coworkers, our relationships with children. We have to have talking and attentive listening. But when we do that with God, we call that prayer. When we're having a conversation with God, it's called prayer. So this idea of being a busy person means, yeah, you're carrying a lot. Talk to the one who can help you carry it all. Help you discern what are the most important priorities. Like when we make God a priority, it allows our other priorities to be better organized. And we learn what is important to hold on to and what is important to let go of.
That's I think that's fantastic advice. I remember when I wasn't praying, it was like helter-skelter all over the place. But the moment I decided to add prayer as like time myself and do it every single day, you know, the Lord leads you into what you should do and what you shouldn't do, what's important, what's not. So I fully agree with you on that.
Yeah, and you know, we live in a really, you know, busy modern society where everybody has schedules to keep. And I think part of the goal of daily prayer is what I call, you know, making an appointment with God. Just like I schedule time to meet with you today, or I schedule a meeting with my colleagues. I have to schedule into my day the priority of the prayer time, you know, to make this appointment with God. And if you were to look at my calendar, I mean, you'll see the times of the day that I schedule, you know, as reminders. And sometimes I put little prayer prompts in my calendar to remind me to pray at a certain time. But I would say for somebody who's a busy person and is worried about, oh my, this seems like a burden or another thing on my to-do list. I try to think of it as having like a date, you know, with God. Like I look forward to having a date with my husband. We just went out to the theater just the other night, and it was a lovely night. We circled the calendar, date. We made the appointment. We both left work at the appropriate time to meet and to go on the date. I think if we look at our life with God in that way, we begin to look forward to it, and it's not a burden. Like it wasn't a burden for me to try to finish up my work early and to take the drive to go out with my husband. A prayer shouldn't be a burden either, because we should want to, if we are having this relationship with God, we want to spend time. So this allows us to be more deliberate in planning our day. And I have to tell you, my prayer looks different, Monday to Friday in terms of the scheduling of it than it does on the weekend. On the weekend it's different. We devote more time on Sundays, to going to church and praying with the community and that sort of thing. But my Monday to Friday is a little more regulated. It's a little more scheduled.
So what are your tips for personal prayer? Because you've listed them on the blog as well, but your own tips for people who are considering now regulating their prayer every day.
Yeah. I'm really happy you brought up that article on Catholic Digest because I've been writing for them for many, many years. And now I have the blessing of working as an editor, to assist that magazine to grow. So it's kind of funny, when we talk about how different things happen in season. When I first submitted my first articles to them, I never would have guessed it would have led to, full-time employment many years later. But anyway, this particular article starts off by talking about this important thing that we just were alluding to before, this idea of making an appointment with God. And why should we do it? Well, if we're Christians and we want to imitate Jesus, it's because Jesus did it. Jesus was a faithful Jewish man. So he learned the formula of prayer from his parents when he was a child, and he came to know the Hebrew Scriptures and the different prayers that were part of life in the synagogue where he grew up and in the temple in Jerusalem. So Jesus is showing us that personal prayer with his Father, Father God, is important, not just only in the temple with the community, if you will, but also we have examples from the gospel on how Jesus took time alone to pray. So he kept these appointed times, both for the community worship and time for private prayer. So I think we want to imitate Jesus. So making this appointment, making this a priority on our calendar is good. The second thing, besides making the appointment, is something that I call, find your happy place. Jesus deliberately sought out solitude. He wanted to have this quiet time. Even in Luke's Gospel, in chapter 11, verse 1, it says, he was praying in a certain place. A certain place. So where might be a good place that you will be well disposed of to pray? This would be maybe a place that's outside of going to your church. And Jesus, again, gives advice here. He says that we should be just praying in our homes. In Matthew chapter 6, he says, when you pray, go into your room, shut the door, pray to your Father. Now, I have to tell you, praying in my room, like my bedroom, is not the best place. I have another place in my living area of my home that's a more comfortable place for me to pray. And, my Bible is there, my journal is there, a few other things that just remind me that this is a place to pray. And that tends to be where I feel more comfortable praying. It's a more comfortable chair to sit in, for one. So again, that is kind of my certain place, my happy place, where I try to keep this appointment. Another time that I like to pray is usually after I've been tied to the desk for many, many hours. I like to go out and take a walk. And I often pray as I'm walking around my neighborhood, because I live in a very kind of rural woodland area where it's very quiet and peaceful to walk. So that's a good place for me to pray as well. But again, this idea of maybe developing a prayer corner in your life or a little place in your home just might be the right thing. For a long time, my husband used to tell me that he used to escape on his lunch break from work, drive the car to a park to eat his lunch, and then he would have his quiet time with God there, just at the park. Like that was his place during the day, away from the busyness and the business of his office. And I was like, oh, wow, he's really making a deliberate effort to just quiet himself before God and have that time. So you can pray, but also listen what God is going to say. The third thing is, I think, and this is important for Christians, to keep your Bible in your prayer place, wherever it is. So if you're on the go, if you have a small Bible, in your purse or, in your briefcase, I think that's a good thing. My Bible's on the table, where my comfortable chair is, where I like to pray. Because we're not just using our own words to talk to God, but we want to hear what God has to say to us. So I really recommend praying with God's Word to lead you into deeper prayer. And I just recently did a podcast on this at Among Women podcast about journaling with the Scriptures, in terms of having more of that kind of dialogue, like in your journal with God. So praying with God's Word really helps bring you into deeper prayer. And, you might just be praying through one of the Gospels. Just say, here in this month of August, I'm going to pray through Matthew. Maybe in the month of September, you're going to pray through Mark. Maybe, the next month, you're going to pray through Luke. And just take a few verses each day to listen to what the Lord is saying. And listen for God's Spirit to inspire you. Like, is something here for me today? What might I be hearing the Lord saying here? So I really recommend that, praying with the Scriptures. And then the last thing I want to recommend, which might sound very basic and very simple, but I think it's a good exercise for every Christian to do, and that's to dive deeper into knowing the Lord's Prayer. People sometimes know it as the Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Well, that is an important prayer for us as Christians, and you might say, why? And it's because that's the prayer that Jesus taught us to pray, and to use that as a springboard. And I can tell you, I come from the Catholic faith tradition, and a recent Pope, Benedict XVI, is really a great Bible scholar. He probably has over 50 books, to his name. But so he's a great devotee of Christ and to God's Word. And he wrote a book called Jesus of Nazareth, and it's in 3 volumes. It's all in the life of Jesus. Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3. But in Volume 1, he does a line-by-line meditation on the Lord's Prayer. And even if you never read anything else that Benedict might ever have written, that chapter on the Lord's Prayer is worth the price of the book alone. So, you could certainly use a book like that to help bring you through the Lord's Prayer, but even in your own prayer time, to just meditate verse by verse on what those words might mean to you in your life. I think that's a good place to start. So those would be some of my basic tips for just your basic call to personal prayer.
In our parish, we have one of the biggest recommendations is to enthrone the Bible. So they ask people and they ask families after Easter not to just leave their Bibles like in the cupboard or in a corner, but to enthrone it in some place where you can actually see it every day, so that people will read their Bibles instead of just leaving it wherever it is. So that's a common practice in our parish, though a lot of people don't like it. They don't. It doesn't go with the decor of the house and things like that. but the recommendation is always to keep it in a place where you can see it, so that the moment you see it, you want to read it. That's the thing.
Well, I think that's not a bad suggestion. And I think if you have children in your home, having a little place, like a little prayer space or a place where that Bible is, that might be the prayer place where you bring the children to pray together as a family. And if you have children who are old enough to read, you might have one of those children's translations of the Bible where even a child in your home could maybe read a story or a few verses from the Bible, so that for the family, to pray around. So that physical placement of the Bible, I think that's something that each person might have to discern. What's the best thing for their home? Maybe, like suggested at your parish, develop a little home altar, or something that might resemble like a little mini chapel, for quiet prayer for your family. And it could be as simple as, a very small copy of the Bible that you just leave out that children can easily use.
So I know that you've mentioned now almost what your own prayer life is like, but just so that people can see and learn and probably take some lessons from you, what's your own prayer routine like?
Well, there's different times of the day that I pray. I am an early riser who has to get to my job by 8 o'clock in the morning, which means I rise pretty early to get ready for the day. Now, also, I think it's important when you're thinking about how you're going to pray and where you're going to pray, you have to take in your state of life into consideration. So let me just say that, I'm an older person who's now an empty nester. I don't have little babies or children, in the morning that need my early morning attention. It's just my husband and I. So I'm in a more quieter stage of life in terms of the mornings. But I do get up in the morning and, have my coffee. And my husband and I actually pray what's called morning prayer, which comes from the Liturgy of the Hours, which is really praying the Psalms every morning. So that's when he and I have our prayer time as husband and wife. And so we are praying through a few of the Psalms together, and then we're bringing our needs of the day, the petitions of the day, the intercessions of the day to God in that moment. And we're not only praying, with, the church at large, globally, who might be up early praying morning prayer, but also we're just praying for our family and for our friends and for the people who have the needs that have been mentioned to us. We bring those to God in the morning. And then we pray the Lord's Prayer together to conclude that, because we're both, sons and daughters of God, so we conclude with the Lord's Prayer together to finish those petitions, and then, we just dismiss, if you will, and both of us kind of go in different directions. My husband has a long commute. He gets in the car and drives to his job. I have a work-from-home situation and an office, so depending on which way I have to go, if I'm going to the home office or the distant office, I dismiss to that. But usually, especially on the work-from-home days, I usually have at least another period of time in the morning after my husband leaves that I can have some quiet time with God. And that usually is the time that I might be praying with one of the Bible verses that God is leading me to pray that day. As a Catholic, we have daily Mass, and the daily Mass readings, there are several readings from the Bible at every Catholic Mass. So sometimes I'm reading one of those and praying with that and journaling a little bit there. That's also a good time for me to do any quiet spiritual reading if I'm reading through a book that's encouraging me in my faith life. So that's my morning, and then I go to work. A lot of times I pray a lot of silent blessings through the day. You know, I ask the Lord to be with me before I start a project at work or before I have a meeting. You know, I prayed for a little bit of time before you and I met today, you know, that God would bless us and bless our conversation and bless our work. So I silently pray through the day, and sometimes audibly. You know, if I'm at lunch with someone, you know, especially in my family, we will pray a blessing before the meal, a time of just thanksgiving and gratitude. And then later on in the day, you know, after I've put in, you know, 6 or so hours, usually by then I really do need a stretch. So if I go for a walk, a lot of times I'm having some quiet prayer time then. And then back in the evening, my husband will return at night, and, you know, we'll have a short prayer before our evening meal. One prayer that has been recommended to me, and I've prayed it with some success and some failure, meaning sometimes I just fall asleep before I do it. But there's a type of prayer called the Examen, E-X-A-M-E-N, which is a brief kind of prayer toward the end of your day, where you just kind of thank God for the day, you look back over your day in gratitude, and then you kind of examine the day, you know, looking for kind of the high points, where you might have really been in tune with God, or maybe the low points where maybe you really struggled with something through the day. And then you bring all of that to God, you know, in your own strengths or weaknesses, and just ask God for a blessing on how you can do better, you know, the next day, and the grace of a peaceful sleep. So that is an up and down thing for me in terms of doing that with success. But a lot of great Christians through the years have really recommended that kind of end of the day kind of prayer.
I think that's an Ignatian, I don't know what they call it, but it's from Saint Ignatius, I think so.
Yes, Saint Ignatius was a great spiritual director, and he was one of the people who recommended that practice. And many others, you know, recommend it as well. And I do think it has great benefit. Now, all that being said, I just want to go back to this idea quickly about the state you are in your life. As I mentioned, you know, once upon a time, I had little children in the house. And the closest thing I had to a morning prayer was, "Oh God, help me. help me take care of this wet diaper and feed these children before they have to go to school." You know, I would have those types of moments with God. But what happened was, sometimes later in the day, you know, during a child's nap time or whatever, that became the good time of the day for me to have a more quiet prayer with God, more of an intentional me and God, you know, moment. And it might have just been 10 or 20 minutes, but that was good, you know, because it just reminded me, you know, who God is and who I am in God's sight. So I just want to, you know, recall to people that while personal prayer really needs to be a priority, you have to ask God, you know, when the best time is in your schedule to have some personal quiet time. I do believe we can all find it. And for some of us, that examine time in the evening after dinner, and I'm not talking about right before you're going to fall asleep in your bed. I mean, some people can do that, but once I'm in bed, I'm usually asleep pretty quickly because I'm usually tired. You know, but some people may have some kind of downtime, like after dinner or whatever, where the evening hours are a little quieter for them. So that examine time can happen during those, you know, few hours before you lay your head on the pillow. So again, I think that's something that you talk to God about, you know, in terms of where your state in life is, and pray as you can.
And looking at your routine, it almost seems like praying without ceasing, right? If you pray as many times, like you dip into God's graces throughout the day, it's almost as if you're praying and you're with Him throughout the day, right? When you're praying at all these times.
Right. The great thing about God is always on. God loves us 24/7. God is always open, so to speak. God is omnipresent. The choice for the human heart is to turn our hearts toward God, throughout the day. And hey, we're human beings. We have distractions. We have traffic we have to drive through. We have phone calls, ringing off the phone. One of the things that I was really convicted of, I want to say almost 3 years ago now, was I needed to spend less time on social media.
Yeah.
And I shut off the notifications on my phone and all these other things and I started to do that just because I felt like I had a certain anxiety if the phone wasn't nearby, and I was like, oh, that's not good. I want to be, less anxious.
Yeah.
So that was something that I started to just do to kind of build a little more quiet into my life. And, hey, it's a necessary tool as I work each day. I'm on Skype, I'm on Twitter, I do all these other things for my work. I have websites I have to maintain. There's lots of online activity that I have to be involved in all the time. But for me, I just, as I can, try to silence and look for the quiet more. So.
And it can be a huge, it can be a rabbit hole. You look at one thing, and then before you know it, you've spent 1 hour, and then on the same this we complain that we don't have the time to pray, when actually we've had plenty of time, but we've just frittered it away on social media.
Sure. Which brings us back to that first idea of making an appointment with God.
Yeah.
Building that mindful time. I have some great friends who are amazingly athletic and really devoted to going to the gym, multiple times of the week in order to keep up with their activities and things like that. And you know what? I have a lot of respect for that, because that is, it's a way to kind of self-improve and to maintain their health, and it can really help kind of clear your mind and that sort of thing. And I try to encourage people to put their prayer life on the same scale, if this is a priority for you, in terms of your health and well-being, to be going to the gym or be playing a certain sport or whatever it is, look at your prayer life in much the same way in terms of the way you prioritize time. And you'll be surprised how you'll be blessed. I mean, not only does it increase your relationship with the Lord and draw you closer, but it also equips you to be a better person, to be a better servant to others. It's kind of like dipping into the well of graces and God's love, so that you can have more love to give. I think for me, some of my most difficult times as a Christian were, especially as a young mom, when I had young children, and the constant giving of yourself as a parent for your child, but to be able to do that every day in love. I had to draw on the well of knowing that I truly was loved first in order to love my children. So there's a line from the gospel that Jesus says, as the Father has loved me, so I love you. And I think that is kind of emblematic of what happens in prayer. When I have time to pray and I understand the love of the Father for me, I'm able to draw on that love to give to others. So as the Father has loved me, as the Father has loved Pat, so I can love you.
I'm glad you brought up young children, because now you've raised young adults. But how is it that parents can teach their young children to pray? Because everyone we've had keeps complaining, how do we teach these children to pray? And one thing is that we've heard over this month in podcasts is that first of all, parents need to pray themselves to set a good example. But what would you say that parents should do to be able to teach their children to pray?
Well, I think it's really vital what you just said in terms of setting a good example. If you want to teach children to pray, you have to model it. Mm-hmm. I think parents have got to remember what kind of holy influence they have over their young children. And here's the thing, especially your young children, they trust you. Mm-hmm. So you show them who you trust by going first in prayer, if you will, and then modeling it. I think age-appropriate resources are out there. As somebody who works, particularly in the publishing world, I know that there are many wonderful books and booklets out there and videos and DVDs for families to avail themselves with in terms of maybe teaching about Christianity, teaching about the Bible, teaching about the Ten Commandments, things like that. So use age-appropriate resources with your children. I think that the goal is to draw them in more to this idea that God the Father loves them, to draw them into a relationship with God first, and then, as is age-appropriate, bring them to this idea that we pray to God because we love God, but mostly because God first loved us. So I think that's important. I have beautiful memories of sitting on the family sofa in the living room, reading through a Bible story with our children, and then just discussing it very simply. It was not, it was not a long course. It wasn't 60 minutes. It was 10 minutes, and a little prayer for each of them. I remember talking about saying grace at the table, the family dinner time, listening to each of our children talk about what were the highs and the lows of their day, and then making that part of our grace, and thanking God for something that happened during the day in that child's life, or asking God to help that child with a particular struggle. I'll also say this. Never be afraid to pray on the spot with your children. Sometimes, you pick them up after school, and you can just tell by the look on their face that something isn't right. Yeah. It may take a while for them to talk about it, but I can't tell you how many times we've prayed about something right there in the car as we were driving home, and asking God to be in the moment. So be in the moment with your kids. And if you have teenagers, I'm going to share one little thing that really helped me stay in touch with the heart of my children, especially when they were teenagers. They knew I was a praying woman. They knew I prayed every day. They knew I prayed every day for them. But when my children were in high school, there was no bus service, so I had to drive them in the mornings. And sometimes it was a carpool, and sometimes I just did it myself before, early in the morning. So I often had those few minutes of captive time when we were in the car. And a question I would ask, not daily, but every couple of days, at least once a week, I would ask my kids, what do you want me to pray for today? I wasn't grilling them or anything, but they knew I was praying. And what happened is they would often tell me something that they were worried about. Sometimes it was simple, like, there's the algebra test coming up. But often it was pretty deep, that maybe they had a friend who was in trouble, or maybe they had a friend who had a serious problem that they were worried about, or whatever. But it opened up their heart to me in a way. And then, of course, what's my responsibility after that? To pray for that. To really bring my children's needs before God. And that also allowed me the opportunity to maybe ask a week or so later, so how did that go? And just see if they open up to that. Again, never forcing your way in, always by way of invitation. because that respects your teenager.
So what is your best advice to somebody now who is thinking, oh, well, I need to now do something about it, and then they'll probably do it for a week or so, and then maybe, struggle with it at some point?
I would say if you are going to start, soon to make an appointment with God, I would try to set it up on your calendar for 30 days. See how it goes.
Okay.
And maybe start with 15 minutes.
Okay.
And see how that goes. And see if that's the right time for you. See if you have to make additional changes in your morning routine in order to keep it. If you're going to choose the morning, for instance.
Yeah.
For some people that might mean, wow, I don't have those 15 minutes right now. I might have to get up 20 minutes earlier to accomplish this or something. So, you know what? If you have to make a little sacrifice for that, that's not a bad thing. That builds our character too. But, try it for, I would say, if you can try it for a month, that's usually a good indicator that, you're doing the best you can. And here's the thing, the mojo of the saints was, today I begin again.
Yeah.
Never be afraid to begin again. Oh, you know what? I missed out on Thursday morning's prayer time because I had to, drive my daughter to the airport. Okay. Begin again.
Yeah.
Here's Friday morning. Let me start again today. Don't keep score. This is not performance. You're not getting a report card, from God, But the idea of your disposition toward prayer, hopefully, will grow.
Yeah.
I would try not to keep score with it. I would try to just always begin again. That is the mojo of the saints. The greatest Christians who've ever lived are the ones who didn't quit, who just said, oh my, I got to dust myself off and start over. That's okay. We have a God who is merciful, who is all forgiving, who just really wants us to spend time with him. So I think that's got to be part of what it means to start and to be patient at the start. Love is patient, right? Love is kind. And we have to be patient with ourselves and kind to ourselves. And I would also ask God for his help, for his Holy Spirit help to do this. Because you'll have inspiration when you need it most.
I know this is not part of our part of the list of questions that I sent you, but listening to you, I think you mentioned praying with your husband, and I know a lot of couples today don't pray together. How is it that you've managed? I mean, how did you all initially decide that you would pray together, and will you recommend this to other people? How can you convince them that they should do this together?
Okay, really depends on where things are in your marriage. I married a believer, somebody who was already devoted to Christ. So from the outset of our marriage, even from the years that we were dating beforehand, we would find ways to pray together.
Okay.
If you have a Christian spouse, if you have someone who's already, a baptized believer who you can appeal to that sensibility of that we're married and this is a gift, prayer is a gift we can share, I think you can begin to have that conversation. Maybe it's something as simple as, why don't we try just praying a grace before meals? And it's okay if you pray a formula prayer before your meal to get started. Maybe it's a prayer before the start of the day. And maybe that could just be a 5-minute blessing. There are some days, I have to be perfectly honest, there are some days that, my husband and I are running to catch a train or a plane, and we cannot have that long time in the morning where we're sitting with the Psalms and we're praying through the Psalms and having our times of petition. Sometimes we literally just stand there in our kitchen, hold each other's hands, and ask God to bless the things of the day. And we just list them out loud before God. We ask for His blessing, and we ask for His protection while we're apart from one another when we're on these trips. Sometimes it's just as simple as that. I do think using formal prayers like the Lord's Prayer can be helpful for people. But once we're comfortable with the idea of actually trying to pray together, then we can pray more spontaneously and more prayer of the heart. I would always propose the idea to pray together, but never impose it. You know, we never come to our spouse and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. Get in line, stand right up here. Never bossy. Always propose it. Always make the invitation. And maybe if your spouse is really not a person of prayer, maybe you can even start with the question of, what can I pray for you?
Correct.
What are the things on your heart that you would like me to pray for this week for you? How can I pray for you this week? And then, maybe over time, start to invite. Say, I'm going to pray after dinner tonight. Would you like to pray with me for a few minutes, and we'll pray about that job thing that you were telling me about? You know, you might be able to invite. Always invite. Never force. Always invitation. Loving invitations to prayer is the way. I know I'm very blessed with the husband that I have, because this was a value in his life before I came along. So it was a value we've been able to impart to our children.
Okay. So if people want to get in touch with you and write to you or email you or find your articles, books, where can they find you online, Pat?
It's patgohn.net. That's patgohn.net. You can also find me at amongwomenpodcast.com. Also on Facebook and Twitter with the same handles, among_women and Pat Gohn. Very easily Googled. The name of the books, Blessed, Beautiful, and Bodacious, and my latest one that came out last year was called All In. And I'd be happy if you enjoy Catholic magazines. You'll find my work in Catholic Digest magazine, and also at Catechist magazine and Today's Catholic Teacher. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much for coming to our show and for spending so much time with us and telling us about prayer.
It's my pleasure.